If there was one piece of political policy that you could introduce to the UK, what would it be?
Housing is probably one of the key issues. I think having a stronger policy around housing that is undoing all the work that's occurred over the past 40 years to sort of move like social housing into the hands of private landlords, and created in a system that means that like for the majority of people they're having to spend 30 to 60% of their wages on their accommodation before they can even think about putting food on the table and like looking after their families.
Controlling landlords, possibly abolishing landlords as a thing, build more council homes, get housing nationalised again, because ultimately, we need to be providing the bare essentials, and housing is a human right. It is not right that anyone is profiting on the fact that they own a home, when, so many people go homeless in Britain today. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, absolutely, control landlords, eradicate them, and build council houses. Number one priority.
So there was one that was very, very popular in the amendments, but it didn't get put on today, which was pay for MPs should be basically an average of the area that they're in. So anyone who's an MP and is part of your party should only be paid a member's wage.
Nationalised water, utilities,
Everything.
landlords, that was not a threat.
The workers' wage, so we want MPs and our representatives to have the average working wage so that they more reflect what's going on in society and what people are experiencing in day to day. When we look at how it's increased in the past 5 years, MPs' salaries, we think that if we tied it to the median average, then average wages will go up a lot quicker because people will be legislating for more and better opportunities for workers.
And then a policy, I guess, maybe more for the country at large.
I think really we just need nationalisation and democratisation of workplaces. So nationalisation of water, private industry is not working well for that. It's completely destroyed our rivers and oceans and things like that. And I think shareholders are just laughing at us and taking our national infrastructure for granted and making money on the back of it. And we need to bring it back into democratic ownership, owned by the whole people for the people.
Do you think that would you extend that just to sort of like public utilities, public goods companies, or do you think it should go a bit further? Because Zara Sultana said that she wants to nationalise the whole economy.
Yes, I'm on board with that, to be honest. I think there's a real case to be made for that, in certain commanding heights of the economies and things like that. They do it well in other countries. I think some things should just be not-for-profit, and that goes far beyond our public utilities, encourage I don't know what to think of an example, just transportation, things like that. And I think we should be radical, and because the current economic system is failing us, that's been failing us for the past 40 years.
Last night at the rally, Zara Sultana made very good points about the need to redistribute wealth in society, and crucially the question of nationalisations. At the end of the day, the entire economy and system that we live under is ran and controlled and owned by a tiny group of elites, of billionaires, of capitalists, and it's no wonder that the world has fallen apart, that we have ecological crisis, that we have a housing crisis and all these things, because when things are ran for profit and the profits of that tiny group, that's the result. So I think we need to take the wealth in society and the industries out of the hands of that tiny clique of people, put them in the hands of working class people, but for nationalisations, starting with infrastructure, water companies and so on, but also Zara Sultana made the point about nationalising banks, nationalising the big industries. At the end of the day, we know that working class people on a democratic basis can run this system far better than the capitalist system. We need a democratic working class control of society. I think that's what we need. So
Brilliant, thank you so much.
I think we should stand on no cuts budgets, ideally in the next May elections. I think all kind of local councillors and MPs should make a commitment and make a promise to refuse to cut public services, because the last 15 years all we've known is austerity. All we've known is cuts to the NHS, cuts to local services. In my own life, in many people's lives, we've all suffered for it. We're lacking the things that we need. They need to stand on a needs budget, to meet the needs of working class people. The things that we lack, we need, when we need. They need to make a commitment to stand against that, to stand against austerity. Because otherwise, what's the difference to Labour? What's the difference to the Tories? It's just going to be another another do-over of that if they can't be different and can't stand against austerity. So I think, yeah, that's what I would say. I think there's a tradition of that, particularly in Liverpool, that they could build upon of the militant council in the 80s. You know, when the militant tendency within Labour, you know, they had only a small number of councillors, but managed to build 5,000 council houses, more than everywhere else in the city, parks, schools, ended homelessness for single women. You know, these great achievements were done because they stood on an anti-cuts people's budget, and they had the support of the working class behind them because they were meeting people's needs. People followed that, and they had that support so much that Thatcher, the Tory government, couldn't bring in the commissioners to put through an austerity budget anyway. They couldn't do it. They wouldn't have got into the city because the people wouldn't have allowed it. Your party needs to think we need to stand against austerity because that's what the people need.
One policy or piece of legislation that you would introduce?
Well, I fully agree. I think Lauren's outlined it perfectly, really. I think a clear anti-austerity stand is the alternative that people really need now. I think, obviously, people have been battered by austerity from both Labour and the Tories for a long while now. And the Greens, while they have good rhetoric, etc., people look to them as a very good option. When they've got into power, if you look at, for example, I believe it was in Bristol Council, making £50 million in council cuts while putting 60 million in the reserves or something along those lines. And then the council leader, Tony Dyer, saying, well, we're working within our constraints. As Lauren said, for example, in the militant council in the 80s in this city, a needs budget was set and it had mass support. And when it gets to that point, people aren't worried about commissioners coming in. Thatcher couldn't even send the army in. It's something that can gather really big mass support. And I think when people are looking towards the likes of Nigel Farage and reform and that sort of thing, I think being able to provide something which is clearly anti-austerity, clearly anti-cuts to public services, and puts forward a realistic, long-term solution to a lot of the material problems that ordinary working class people face, I think that's something that really would get a lot of support and would help against this rise in reform and things that we're seeing at the moment.
And yourself, one piece of policy or legislation?
Yeah, I mean, you can probably guess what it is. Fight at local level, fight for funding, fight on these needs budgets platforms to prove to people that if you're willing to fight the Starmer government at a local level, that if you got into power, you'd be prepared to fight the IMF, the World Bank, the EU, all of these big organisations that would clamp down on organisations trying to put through socialist policies at a national level. Well, if we want to have faith that they're going to do that, start now, start at a local level.